Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Roger Nairn. Roger is the founder of JAR, a branded podcast agency that has spent a decade helping enterprise brands like Amazon and Wharton create shows that actually do something. JAR recently rebranded from JAR Audio to JAR Podcast Solutions. And I'm only bringing this up because I think it's a shift that reflects how much this industry has evolved. I wanted to have Roger on because branded podcasts are having a moment. But most of them, honestly, are terrible. Roger has a point of view on why that is, and more importantly, what it takes to build one that works for both the brand and the audience. In this episode, we discuss why most branded podcasts are glorified press releases nobody listens to, how JAR's advertising background shapes how they build shows, how to prove podcast ROI to a CMO who only thinks in MQLs, and more. Lead gen is the hardest part of running an agency. For most, it's unpredictable, it's slow, and it's usually expensive. Gia flips that. It's the all-in-one growth platform that turns your existing relationships and client work into a steady pipeline. Gia automates lead gen, follow-up, and content, and it's all from the work you're already doing. You can check it out and get some free bonuses at getgia.ai/dynamic agency. And now, Roger Nairn. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. Why did JAR rebrand from audio to podcast solutions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll take you a few steps back, which is that JAR started almost 10 years ago, and in podcast years, that's a long time.
Yeah,
and at the time, we were one of the only games in town when it came to brands and podcasts. So essentially, being an agency that exclusively helped brands create their own podcast. Now, fast forward, we got through COVID and we're now in a position where I don't want to say podcasting has become commoditized, but there's just a ton more competition. Mm-hmm. And over those years, we've actually built up this incredible bench. We're a team of 23 and a big chunk of our team are strategists. And so we've really emphasized strategy in everything we do. And so we came to the realization that JAR is not just a production team. We are a true marketing partner with our clients. And, we have a saying that every podcast has to have a job, or every podcast needs a job to do. So, and what that really means is every podcast needs to serve a purpose. Now that could be, building awareness. It could be educating the market on a certain topic. You name it. So the the J in JAR stands for job. We then need to be crystal clear on who our audience is. And I don't just mean demographics. I mean, what is their entertainment behavior? What do they like to read? What do they like to watch? What video games do they like to play? Because guess what? Your podcast is competing with all of that. Your podcast is competing with time. And so we really need to understand who that audience is. And then most importantly, what do they need out of your podcast? Do they need to be taught something? Do they need to be entertained? Do they need to have a laugh or a cry? Because we then ask the brand, of those things they need, what can you deliver that is unique to your brand? And then finally, results. It's really important that we understand going into our shows, what does success look like? What are we measuring? What at the end of the day is going to make us all look back and say this is actually doing its job? But also, as you know, as a podcaster, a podcast is not a live thing. So it is, though, a living, breathing thing. So it can be edited. It can be, it can evolve over the course of a season based on the data that you're being shown. So we have to be measuring the right things to understand, what's working, what isn't. We're able to track a ton of different things because that's all going to factor into the content itself. So this is a long way of saying that JAR changed its name to JAR Podcast Solutions because we truly use podcasts to solve business problems. And I'll give you a sneak peek into one of the reasons we kind of landed on this idea was a book I read. And I know you're going to ask me this question near the end of the interview, but there's a fantastic book out there called Madison Avenue Makeover. It's written by Michael Farmer. And what he did was he sat in with the agency Huge, which at the time was one of the largest digital agencies in the world. And they went through the same sort of challenges, more competition, needing to position themselves. And what they did was they started to productize their agency essentially. And so we've done the same. Everything we do is based on solving a specific business problem, and so when a client comes to us and says, "I need to build up, we need to build up thought leadership in artificial intelligence," we have a product for that or a solution for that, and that is XYZ type of show that's going to answer, or that's going to have this type of host and these types of guests, and it's going to have this sort of cadence, and we're going to craft the format this sort of way, and we've had a lot of success with it.
Right. So,
man, that was a long answer.
On a problem.
Oh, what a terrible podcast guest.
You do this for a living? No.
I do this for a living.
Everything I do with my clients, like we try to focus in on a single problem. Because like most generalist agencies, it becomes very hard for you to actually market and get attention. But when you have a problem that you solve, it's like people aren't, nobody goes like window shopping for agencies, right? Like they're looking to get a solution to their problem. And so when you say, we solve this, it's like you become one of the only like agencies that they're even considering.
Absolutely.
And so the fact that you like, that's where you are and you have like the different solutions. I think being able to also productize means you guys have like, you've gotten the reps of doing these things, right? And so now not only on the like the demand side of being able to attract new business because you solve this, even on the supply side for being able to deliver, it's like you're just better, you're more efficient, like your team has gotten the reps in of doing this. And so
we're over 75 individual podcasts now, individual shows.
Right. That you're managing?
I mean, right now we're managing, I want to say it's in the 20s, 25 to 30s. It fluctuates. But the actual full service of, individual original productions is over 75.
What is through those, what has been the most common, problem that people are trying to solve for their business with the podcast?
Yeah, it's engagement. It's relationship building with a specific audience, and it's usually something quite niche. And I'll give you a perfect example. Amazon came to us with a business challenge, which was that they wanted to create better engagement with small business owners, because I didn't know this at the time, but I think it's now over 70% of the products you buy on Amazon are actually just sold by small business owners. It's little mom and pops all around the world. Amazon's just the sort of the distribution hub for it all. Yeah. And so they wanted to attract, better and more diverse small businesses. And so they came to us with that challenge, and we really dug deep into what that audience needs. And it turned out they need more resources, and they needed more resources around, things like, what do I do if I have a partnership that's gone south? Or how do I set up, what do I do for my personal brand? Or how do I set up, a marketing flywheel, things like that. And so we crafted a show for them called This Is Small Business. We found this amazing host, Andrea Marquez. She herself is looking to start a business. So she treats the show as her sort of learning vehicle for what she wants to do. It just happens to be that the audience is listening in and gets to learn from what she's learning. Found amazing guests that are entrepreneurs themselves, and it's kind of it's the behind the scenes warts and all of what goes into starting a business. And we actually just surpassed 1 million downloads, which is really exciting.
Wow. Yeah. So you said something interesting here, like you found a host. So obviously for a company the size of like Amazon, right? That's probably important to like find a good host. Smaller businesses, probably not as easy for them to hire out. I guess, how important would you say it is for someone within the company to be like the face of the podcast and running that show versus finding someone else who is a professional interviewer or host?
Yeah, great question. I wouldn't say it's vital. However, there are instances where it's important to have at least a voice from the company on the show. Now, one thing we love to do, and it's a great sort of hack for finding a host, is look to the radio world. There's a lot of fantastic voices out there that frankly are looking for more work. There's also a lot of opportunities in the academic world, whether they're professors around certain topics. They're great talkers and they love to have a presence. They love to build their own personal brands. There's also ex-journalists or current journalists that are out there, and there's a number of different ways that you can. They're very approachable because they are always looking for leads, and so they usually leave their contact information available. Now, we often get the question like, can our CEO be the host? And of course they can. However, anytime I would put anybody from the company in as a sort of leading voice on the show, I would be very cautious because it can easily stray into press release land, essentially, where they're just spouting off about the brand itself, and they're saying all the great things about XYZ industry, because that's just their natural muscle memory, right? And so we always want that to be as sort of dialed down as possible, because nobody wants to listen to a 30-minute ad, essentially. Right. And nobody wants to hear about all the the smooth things that go on. They want to hear the rough things as well. That's what great podcast listening is true sort of unvarnished conversations. Right. And not every brand is willing to go down some of those scarier roads or maybe have sort of diverse viewpoints on a certain topic. Now, one thing we love to do is sort of have, let's say, one of our shows was with Allianz, the insurance company. In fact, it was the topic was trade insurance, which even just saying it out loud, exciting. I can't think of a more boring topic. In fact, when I went to my business partner, Jen, who's our chief creative officer, and I said like, hey, we got a new client. She's like, great. What's it about? I'm like, trade insurance. She's like, are you kidding me? Like, why would, anyways, what we did though, is we took, we sort of threw that boring topic on its head, because trade insurance is all about risk, right? That's the insurance world in general. And so we created almost like a game show called Wheel of Risk. And so the podcast is called Wheel of Risk. And essentially every guest that comes on the show gets to spin the wheel of risk. And then we talk about that certain topic. Now, one thing we would do though is after we had sort of told the story about the guest and what their kind of risk story was, we would then bring in an expert from Allianz to kind of fill in some of the gaps. And I'm not saying that they would come in and say, we got a product for that and we got a product for that, but they would lend their own, insights into the topic. And it worked out great. It's, award-winning, very, very successful show. And you can imagine that, folks from IBM have the most amazing thought leaders. We work with a quantum computing company called D-Wave that's literally leading the charge on quantum computing, which is the next thing after AI. And so it only makes sense that their lead engineer is the host of the show, because there's literally nobody else in the world who could talk about quantum computing more than him. Now we have to train him, or we have to give him the opportunity to sort of work out some of the kinks, because, talking into a microphone is not something everyone does every day, but even more so, it's interviewing people is something that is quite unique to a lot of people. So we run them through training, and we give them a really good opportunity to feel as comfortable as possible.
Right. I wish I could remember what just recently, I guess, talking to my wife the other day, and there was some industry that I had multiple conversations with. For whatever reason, I was like, man, if there was just one person in this industry that had a sense of humor, he would crush with a podcast. Right. But I wish I could remember what it was. I'll send that to you later.
Was it funeral homes?
Yeah, that would be a good one. Anyone in mortuary affairs.
Totally.
Which actually, so random story for the audience. We have one funeral home back in my hometown, Northern Maine. And older family members passing away, but the funeral director or funeral home director is always there. I'm like, man, every time I see you, I feel like someone in my family's dying. And they had no sense of humor. So it's like, okay, well, there we go.
Not to be too self-serving, but I actually have a podcast, a personal podcast called Dead Dads, and I created it after my dad died. And one of the things I really was missing was, or one thing I saw was that there's not enough. There's not enough conversation about death, and frankly, there's not enough, kind of black humor and jokes about it.
Yeah.
Especially amongst men, we're not great at talking about death, and so my buddy Scott and I started it. So check out Dead Dads.
Yeah.
It's awesome. A lot of fun conversations about death. We actually interview other men who have just lost their dads as well, and we swap stories and share what they've learned about their experience.
No, so I mean, pulling that back to like just the idea of having different jobs for a podcast, even for a personal podcast, it's like there are people looking for that right now. Like, I mean, I know plenty of people like through my life who would like I can go refer that podcast to them, and it makes sense that it's
deaddadspodcast.com.
There you go. Talking about like finding interviewers and hosts and stuff, like it is interesting that there's a specific skill set that comes to podcasts. Like I've read books to try getting better at like having these conversations, like what questions should I be asking? But every now and then I'll be on someone else's podcast and it's like, they're just talking to me, but it's like, it feels so good. Like they're so curious and like, they know the next question that they should ask. Like, is there a way to cultivate those skills like for a host, like, or what are you thinking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing I will say, and you said it yourself, is curiosity. And you also need to get into a bit of you need to get into a sort of Zen-like state where you're not thinking about anything else except your guest and you're listening, and your brain is just sort of jumping off to the next question based on the conversation. Now, that being said, I would bet that great podcast host that you had the experience with had a bit of a roadmap going into the conversation with you, much like you do as well. Like you have questions, they don't necessarily have to be like strictly asked questions, but oftentimes like I'll go into a conversation with, just sort of notes on some of the things that I want to either touch on or some possibilities for directions that the conversation could go down. And that way you're not just freestyling, you have because at the end of the day, when you go to do your edit, you do want to have a story arc to the conversation. Right. And so if you're talking about just random topics and it's all over the place, it's just going to be a bit more of a cluttered conversation and might not be the best listening experience. But if, to your point, you just have a great conversation and happen to be hitting on certain topics that are important to the audience along the way, I think that's the recipe for success 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. And I think that's where, so like the episodes that I find like are stronger for me are the ones where I do just have a conversation because I'm interested in the topic and I'm trying to learn, and like I'm pulling this information out for me, versus other interviews where it's like I get in this mindset of I have to like help my audience. I have to find the right questions for my audience, and it's pulling me out of the conversation to be able to to do this. And so,
but that's actually a really good thing to mention as well, is though that, sorry, my coffee machine is turning off. I'm going to wait for it to, I don't know if you can hear it or not.
No,
it's annoying. You can edit this part out. That's a really good, point, because the audience you have out there is an active audience, and a really well done podcast, you're gonna have a relationship with your audience, and they're gonna want to help you craft the show because it's for them. It's not for you, it's for them. And so one thing we always recommend is to reach out to your audience and say, hey, I'm interviewing Roger Nairn. We're going to talk about the podcast industry. Does anybody have any questions? And you'd be surprised the amount of people that would fire back stuff. And there's other things you can do these days, whether it's, newsletters, and then you've got email addresses, or sometimes with our shows, we'll do text campaigns. Obviously opt-in text campaigns, but the that sort of community aspect is really important for building audience. And so the questions that you come up with are one thing, but what do they actually want to hear is another.
Right. I think it probably also helps to actually care about that topic, right? Like just knowing, like if I actually want to learn these things because I know it helps my audience. Like that's where that works. But
Totally.
I want to, all right, most podcasts fail, right? Just straight up. And part of it is a consistency issue. They just, they can't, like, I can't even remember the super small percentage that gets to like 20 episodes.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, it's like, they're just not delivering something of value, or what, I guess, what are you seeing as the issue that stops podcasts from actually becoming successful?
The number one thing we see is that the podcast is being created for the creator and not for the audience. And I think when you go to create your show, sure, you probably will come up with the idea first and then start looking for exactly who that audience is. But it should really be the other way around, or at least you should have the little bit of a nugget of an idea and then sort of craft it based on what's actually of value for that audience. So, we just talked about my personal podcast, Dead Dads. One thing we did was we started talking to friends and people around us who had lost their dads. And we said, hey, this is a little bit of a nugget of an idea for a show we have, but really, if you were to listen to a podcast about, the grieving process, especially, amongst men, what would you like to hear? What are some of the things you'd like to get out of it? Some said that they'd like to hear real stories about other people's experiences. Some of them said they'd love to learn sort of tips and tricks on, how to deal with their grief. Some of them said that they wanted to learn about sort of resources out there that they could, lean on. And then we craft the show based on that. Now, obviously, we're going to have our own sort of desires and input that we want to apply to the show, because it's, it is also for us in the sense that it's our creative product. However, much like, the film world or the TV world, they really lean on audience data and they really lean on focus groups for a very good reason. It's also the reason why, Marvel will make 10 versions of the same type of movie, because it works and that audience is asking for more. And so you're crafting based on the audience versus what you want to see. And I think a lot of shows are based on just the me side of it versus the you. So one of the things we talk about in our company is everything we produce, or every relationship we start with an audience member, we should be going in sort of palm up versus palm down. So palm up being, here, I have something for you. Here's a gift. Here's a free, free gift, free podcast, versus taking, and most advertising is taking based, right?
Mm-hmm. I like that. I'll cite you, but I'm going to reuse that. I'm stealing. So, speaking of just advertising, it's like, so at the, I don't know, the stinger, bumper, I guess, whatever you want to call it with a podcast might have different terms. Having, like, how important is it to have the same CTAs, or like, are we changing it up every time? Like, we know we want someone to take a certain action by listening to the show. How do you think about structuring that in order to achieve those desired results?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that all shows that we do need a CTA. I mean, so oftentimes the shows that we produce are top of funnel. It's about brand building. So we very rarely talk about the brand in any of our shows. We don't put ads for our clients and their products or services in the middle of the show. Sometimes we do. And then we oftentimes will not say at the end of the episode, if you want to learn more about quantum computing, go to dwave. You know what I mean? Now we will say, if you want to subscribe, please do so. And if you want to listen to more episodes or watch more episodes, go to XYZ. And that's obviously an action we want them to take. Now, your original question though, if there is a scenario where you do want to have sort of brand-based, sort of sales-based, CTAs, we'll try all sorts of different things. And actually the way that, podcast technology works these days is essentially you're adding donuts to the end of every episode, and then you're able to dynamically insert whatever that call to action creative is. And so you can be testing all sorts of different things. And same goes with the midpoint, or same goes with any point in the episode. You can put donuts in there and then dynamically insert whatever message you want to include and test, test based on that. Now, obviously you're going to want to include things like unique URLs and, so that you can track conversions, but, the actual insertion of those messages, you can test. I would say though, just be careful. I think podcast is a very unique medium in that it is an intimate experience you have with that audience, and so then to go in sort of hand down versus hand up can really sour that relationship quickly. Yeah. And so if you're injecting too much of the brand into the episode, you can lose and you can lose audience members. And I will say also, going back to the access to the data you have in the podcast space, you'll be able to tell where audience members are dropping off of episodes, and you'll be able to correlate that with where you've injected more of your brand into the episode. And so you'll be able to tell quite quickly if you're turning people off.
Yeah. So I guess briefly, what tool are you using to be able to track like listen rates?
Yes. So
where the drop offs are.
So most of that is done through the host server that you're using. We happen to use Co-Host a lot, but we've also used Omni Studio in the past. There's others like Libsyn and there's a number of different companies out there. I would say to check out their sites, ask for a free trial just so you can get a feel for the behind the scenes. We happen to use Co-Host because we've trialed a whole bunch, and they happen to be the best when it comes to brands or the brand metrics that we're able to see within the dashboard. Excuse me. And so the platform for us works best. But I would say that all of them out there are quite good at what they do. Buzzsprout is great. A lot of times our clients will come to us with a show that already lives on a certain platform, and we'll just keep it there because it's working for what it needs to do.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm using Transistor.
Yeah,
and
great.
I love it for the simplicity, but I can't see that data metric, which would be fascinating for me as a marketer and someone who loves seeing this stuff. Like I would love to see where, like, are people falling off at a certain point?
Oh, it doesn't have that?
No, I mean, unless I just don't know how to use the tool.
I'll tell you, I feel like this is an ad now for Co-Host, but one of the things that we can do with Co-Host is, and it's not my company, but one of the things we can do with Co-Host is we can tell what companies or organizations are listening to our clients' podcasts. And so essentially what's happening is the IP address is connecting itself to whatever organization is attached to it. Now, is that a perfect measurement? Because technically, they could be working from home, or they could, somebody else could be using their computer. But it does give us a lot of really interesting data. I mean, the signal is incredible. Like we work with a lot of financial institutions, and one in particular said, as one of the sort of goals of the show, is he wanted to be a show that is listened to by more people in the halls of government, essentially. And we're able to see that, people from the House of Representatives are listening, and people from the Senate are listening. And, that's just gold for them.
Yeah, man. So if he's got their ear, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have some advice they want to get out.
It's lobbying, right?
Okay. As we start winding down here, what should I have asked you about anything around podcasting for or really around what should people be thinking about with podcasting? Like what didn't I ask you here that?
Yeah, I think the one question you didn't ask is what's going on with video.
That's it. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's no secret that YouTube is absolutely killing it right now. And the numbers fluctuate, but there are periods of time where YouTube is the number one source for where. So this is important distinction. It's the number one source for where people are finding podcasts. It's not necessarily the number one place where people are consuming podcasts. And actually, the data shows, a recent report came out from Sounds Profitable, which is a sort of podcast industry think tank, let's call it, they came up with some research that said that people are platform hopping. So because of the algorithm, we all know that YouTube has an incredible job of, bubbling to the surface content that we're going to be interested in. And so oftentimes they'll pop a podcast in front of your eyes and you'll maybe start watching it, but then life goes on and you need to walk the dog and you need to drive to work, or you need to go to this, you need to hop on the bus and go to school. So oftentimes people are switching to Spotify or Apple or, whatever podcast listener they like to. Sometimes they continue on YouTube. Now the important thing to remember though is that YouTube is its own beast. You can't, long are the days where you can just record a podcast like this and necessarily expect like total success by just, flinging it onto YouTube. You need to develop the show so that you can win with the algorithm. And that includes everything from the titling of the episodes to the show descriptions to the tagging, really strong hook to the episode. You need to think about the thumbnail. Like there's just a lot more to consider versus on Apple and Spotify. There is no real algorithm to beat. Whereas, if anybody's ever had a show if anybody's ever had a video on YouTube, you know that algorithm is your make or break. And there's a whole like cottage industry on how to beat the algorithm. And it needs to be thought of as its own strategy, which is why, we've built up our video team as like a separate team within the company. Now they all work together with our audio team, but we didn't just take audio producers and all of a sudden put a hat on them saying, you're now video producers as well, which is what a lot of agencies have done. I'd say the majority of them have done. Which is not fair, first of all, to the producer, but also it's not effective because it's a completely different beast that you need to be considering. So we went out and found the best YouTube strategists and the best video editors for YouTube. And in fact, some of our editors just won the very first ever Emmy Award in podcasting for the for Amy Poehler's podcast, Good Hang. Like these guys are the best. Like they rock when it comes to success on YouTube. So you need to think completely different.
It's I haven't explored YouTube the way that I should, mainly because I do my own editing. I don't want to have to deal with the video. Someone had mentioned, someone had said like, basically there's no reason not to just RSS feed your podcast, like your audio onto YouTube, because like it's still searchable. So like if you're not going to do the video, at least you can get it there. And most people aren't watching necessarily. They're like, it's in the background while they're working. And that's a really great point so as an agency owner, one of the big sort of not really dilemmas, but one of the big conversations I now had to face with a client was, okay, client, you want to be on YouTube. Well, now we need to think about video. Okay. That's going to double the budget, essentially. Right.
Maybe not always in some cases, but a lot of times, if you want to do a good job, it's going to double the budget. Now, why do you want to be on video? Why do you want to be on video on YouTube? Oh, because it seems to be what everybody's doing. It's the old TikTok or social media sort of thing where it's like everybody else is, we should too. Okay, but why? First of all, do you have any data that shows that your audience is actually using YouTube? Well, yeah, we actually, now that you mention it, we don't have a lot of our audience on YouTube. Well, then let's not spend,
you're right,
six figures extra on a YouTube video product, because the other thing, to your point, is are they actually going to be watching it, or are they just going to be consuming it in the background? And in which case, you've just spent a lot of money for something visual that really you just need audio for. That being said, sorry to cut you off, but that being said, I feel like the whole RSS feed connection to YouTube, I think it's all still quite a clunky mess. And I can't even get them to go public I have to manually go into YouTube and move them from private to public if I want them to be seen there. So yeah, I've actually turned them off. My personal podcast, again, we did that, and it felt really confusing as to like what's the video versus the audio. We had to like relabeled all of our artwork so that it said, but then like the content was, because our show is actually what we would consider to be video first. We record it in a studio and we have professional editors, and then we do an audio version. A lot of times it's sort of the other way around. Because of that, it was essentially the same audio. So actually the algorithm is sort of hearing two of the same things. And I don't know if that's really helping. Right. And so we removed it, which I think is at least we made it private. So if you really want to listen, we can give you the link. But the whole UI of that is just very, very clunky.
Yeah. I can definitely agree with that. But two more questions for you.
Yeah, for sure.
With the first one, which you may already have answered, unless you want to change your answer. What book do you recommend every agency owner should read?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend reading Madison Avenue Makeover. First of all, it's just a really good sort of behind the scenes of, I think, what's going on with a lot of creative agencies right now, especially with consolidation and especially with the big five taking over and struggling themselves, plus AI. I think there's just a lot of agency owners that are asking themselves sort of what's our next step, us included. We're constantly thinking about that. And it's a really good behind the scenes, literally from day one, where the executives went on a retreat to sort of start rethinking the business all the way through to the success of the agency now. Really good behind the scenes. I'll throw another quick one out there, which is called Very Good Copy. It's by Eddie Schleicher. Yeah. Schleicher. Yeah. I think just, right, sorry.
I have it right here.
Oh, do you?
I just moved it from my counter this morning.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite reads in the past couple of years. And I think given, the rise in AI writing, and it's just a really simple form of writing, I find his is. And, you're going to learn a ton from the book itself, but actually his writing style, I think, can be replicated by pretty much anybody. It's very emotive, but also very simple. And I think it works great in social. If you're somebody that writes a lot of LinkedIn posts, like his style is very short and sweet. It's like little mini blog posts, but in, 500 words sort of thing, right. Or 500 characters sort of thing. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah. I
actually just signed up for a course of his, which doesn't start till June, nice. Which I didn't realize till I signed it up. I'm like that. I feel like I'm going to forget.
Very far out. Yeah. No, I read that entire book on a flight from, I was going to Alaska from Maine, but it was, cool. I think from Maine to like Seattle. Whatever, like consume the entire book. It was just like, yes, like I don't know. I put it down the entire flight. So
yeah, and it's one of those books like you have, it's, just off the side of your desk and flip through it in between calls. Some good stuff in there.
Awesome. Last question. Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can check us out at jarpodcast.com. Also on LinkedIn, Roger Nairn. Love to meet people, reach out. We also, attend a lot of events. So I'm going to be at the branded content days in a couple of weeks in New York. I'm not sure when this episode's coming out, but I'm going to be talking on stage there about the success of one of our shows that we did a brand lift study around. So yeah, hopefully see some of you at some of the advertising and marketing and creative conferences coming up.
Awesome. Roger, thanks for joining.
Thanks so much, sir. Appreciate it.
That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.